There are an absolute ton of legendary champions in Raid Shadow Legends, and what we're going to be doing today is talking about every single one of them. In this video, we're going to be mentioning if each legendary character is good, what they're used for, basically just kind of a basic synopsis of every legendary. If that sounds good, go ahead and hit that like button for me, as this one took a lot of effort. With that being said, if I've earned a subscription by the end of the video, sounds good. Otherwise, don't worry about it, and let's get going. We'll be starting from the bottom as we go through these fairly quickly, and we're going to start with Bonespear. Bonespear is effectively a support character that mixes a good amount of healing, removing debuffs, as well as the ability to put every single debuff effectively on one target. You compare her with like a debuff spreader, which can be quite good. The passive is also quite good as it effectively transfers debuffs back to the attacker. If you get her, she is 100% worth fully maxing out, and she is a top tier champion. Genzin is a single target based turn meter fill specialist. So what he does is consecutively fill his own turn meter while damaging the enemy. He's not incredibly impressive, but he is worth building. The fact that he has 60% decreased defense is kind of nice. He's effectively like a really expensive, really much better version of War Maiden. He has speed up and resistance up, and it is actually pretty decent against the Doom Tower bosses. Not extremely impressive, but definitely pretty good. So he is worth building. Nobel is a legendary which really is effectively required to have enemies under fear in order for him to work really properly. His passive does in fact place fear. You can see whenever an enemy's turn meter is fully depleted by any champion, 50% chance of placing true fear debuff on the enemy for one turn. Yes, that can go up to 75%. So you really need people that remove turn meter. Now he does remove turn meter himself if you look here, because you can have a 100% chance when booked of decreasing each enemy's turn meter by 20%, and then obviously that triggers with the passive, and there's no cooldown on the passive, so you can continually do that over and over and over again with the true fear placements. He also ignores defense on the A2, which is kind of nice, and he reduces buffs on his A1. So he does have a few things going for him. He's worth building because of the CC he can apply with true fear, but he works way better when you have like a miscreated monster or somebody else that can do fear that works with him. Speaking of somebody who places fear, Yoshi The Drunkard does that, as well as this was a fusion character, so a lot of people actually have him. Ally speed in all battles is pretty good. The problem with Yoshi is that his A2 really only attacks twice, so you can do HP burn maybe on 2 people. If this was attacks everybody, he would be way, way, way better. That being said, I'm just nitpicking. He's still a good character because this move right here is really great. Look at this. You get the increased accuracy, which you need on things like Doom Tower, and the chance of placing true fear, not just fear debuff on all enemies for one turn. Pretty good because it goes up to 75% chance, but then goes to 100% chance instead. This is with the books, with enemies under increased attack buff. So if you are going like second in arena, or they have anyone that has increased attack really on them, then absolutely it's pretty good. It's on a 3-turn cooldown. So he's not bad at all. He's worth building, obviously. And in my personal opinion, he would pair pretty well with the previous legendary Nobel. So Lady Kimi, or however you pronounce it, I don't know. She's actually really good. She's kind of a turn meter specialist as well. That tends to be most of what the Shadow can work on, decreasing turn meter or gaining it. This is a unique move, though. Removes 1 random buff from each enemy, then has 75% chance of placing block buffs and debuff for 2 turns, then fills the turn meter of all allies by 15%, places 50% increased attack and 30% increased speed. Increased accuracy. So you get accuracy, speed, and you place block buffs at the same time. I don't know another character that does that. And if you look at her A2 here, chance of placing decreased accuracy. So you get accuracy on you can place decrease on the enemy and decrease speed on the enemy. So she is kind of like a manipulator of accuracy and turn meter. This is also pretty cool too, because the passive, whenever she places debuff on enemy, also decreases enemy's turn meter by 5% for each debuff placed. So you can kind of see how she works. It's all about removing small bits of turn meter and gaining small bits of turn meter. And look at that. It looks like a Vescar weapon she's holding. Really good job on the R2. I just really like this character. The problem is the aura is ally speed and Doom Towers only, but it is 30% Jintoro is just awesome. The passive makes it where anytime his turn meter gets filled, it's increased by 50% basically, which is just insane for anyone that, even if you have like an apothecary on the team, it's really good. Here, steals 100% of the target's turn meter, is completely overpowered. Placing decreased defense and weaken at the same time is insane, and it can attack up to 5 times. All right, time to talk about the dwarves, and the dwarves are a good one to talk about because you have Trunda in it, which... I mean, what can I say about Trunda that hasn't been said in a million videos? Potentially the best legendary in the entire game. Has one of the hardest hitting moves in the entire game with her A3. Also does HP burn and stun. Has AoEs, has stun. The passive increases resistance. The character is nuts, okay? And the fact that you can even increase her own attack by 36% if you need to with the aura is ridiculous too. She's essentially used in Platinum Arena and Nuking Waves and in Doom Tower. And she's there for any time you need to hit twice because you build her with no accuracy and just tons of crit damage and attack. You hit twice and basically one shot, or I should say 2 shot, almost anything on the map. Underpriest is another fusion character that is effectively a support that's based around shields. He can be really good in the Doom Tower, which is, he also has an aura for it because that's kind of where he was meant to be. You got HP burn, you got attack all enemies, which is an interesting move because on top of attacking all enemies, it removes a random debuff. But then look at this, increases the value of shields buffs on all allies by 30% of damage inflicted. And so if you already have shields on somebody, he actually just increases how much the shield already has on it, which is a fairly unique move. He's worth the build. I've seen him used in some stuff. I personally have never used him, but I didn't go for the fusion because I didn't really find him that appealing, but you can use him. I think he's been one of the ones that people probably consider kind of in the medium of fusions, not the best one ever, but not really the worst one. Hurndig, I think, is one of the better new legendary characters. His basic attack, look at this, okay? Attacks an enemy, grants an extra turn, decreases the cooldown, stasis strike by 2 turns if this attack kills an enemy. Stasis strikes the A3, which what it does is it fully depletes the target's turn meter, okay? But if it's a critical, attacks everyone. Also, places weaken and HP burn after the attack on enemies whose turn meter below 30%, meaning he depletes everyone's turn meter, then he HP burns everybody. So effectively, he's kind of like, anyone that does AoE HP burn, I guess, but better because he has weaken on top of it. Then his A2 also does decrease defense and decrease accuracy. So he, in my opinion, he's nuts. And this is also really good, which just fills the champion's turn meter by 10% every time they are hit. It occurs once per hit. So if he's hit multiple times, with a triple hit or something, he gets 30%, for instance. Ally attack and arena battles is kind of whatever, but his A3 and A2 are both pretty good because you basically have AoE defense down and AoE weaken on the same character. Mountain King I've talked about a million times. I've built a million of these guys. They have the highest HP base in the game, I believe, other than maybe one person. Or maybe he is the highest HP base, and his damage based upon both attack and HP, so he hits very hard. He's effectively a one-shot nuker that's also extremely tanky, has really good crit damage base at the 63%, 1400 attack. You can basically use Mountain King in a shield set to get absolutely ridiculous shields for people right off the bat if you want, or you can use them in arena as a single target nuker. That's basically what he's used for. Worth the build, especially for a shield set. And my cat is moving moving the old camera there. Thank you, kitty. Maulie is another one worth the build. One of the only revives within the dwarfs entire faction, really. Highly recommend for faction wars. Also very good in arena. Has turn meter manipulation, AoE provoke, and an HP burn. Is an overall fairly decent kit, especially for the dwarves, because you need more or less all of those things in the dwarves. And on top of it, she was a fusion. If I remember correctly, there was an event for her. And so a lot of people actually have her. And there's a pretty good amount of love for this character I've actually seen. People almost always talk positively about her. On the other hand, Samar Gemcursed has pretty much unanimously, let's try that word again, unanimously been considered kind of a pile of garbage. Tormin The Cold was probably the first character that came out that really was like, okay, this is some pretty massive power creep that's starting to come to the game, changed the way that the meta was in arena, as well as was one of the best fusions in the game. If you missed this one at the time, it really, really hurt to miss him. Absolutely need to build him. He is a counter to Turn Meter, as well as a counter to basically anyone that doesn't have the new stuff on top of Tormin that's so good. I mean, Tormin was a step. You know how in like a ladder there's like rungs, right? Well, he was the very top step, and then someone added like another ladder, and now there's a whole bunch of more rungs and more characters that kind of counter this and, you know, this and that. But he used to be the OG, and he's still really good when you pair him with HP burn people, especially AoE HP burn, and I still use him in Doom Tower like all the time. Man, what have I got myself into? 2 factions down, 14 to go. Okay. Let's get going. So Wurlim Forstking was the Battle Pass legendary. It's considered one of the characters that needs a buff. Was the first character that brought strength into the field, which kind of changed the meta a little bit in terms of actual high-end defensive play. Still not one of the best characters in the game. Ally defense and Doom Tower battles got added later on because he was before the Doom Tower even came out. He's depressing to look at now because other characters do what he does, but better, especially since Lydia came to the game, and most people who I would say have Wurlim done are starting to get to the point of having Lydia, and Lydia has strength and it's just better. So it kind of feels bad, man. There was a very temporary moment where people were trying to make him work in Arena. I remember, I think there was a couple Platinum teams that I saw using him, but he's not really extremely awesome. He was also one of the first people, if not the first person, to bring in a decrease in critical damage as well as increasing critical damage. These were when the new buffs came out, and they were really pushing the Battle Pass, and him having these new moves made people want to try to get him. The basic attack is kind of like a really crappy freeze perfect Val move. At least he's based upon defense. If you get him, he's one of your only legendaries. He's worth building. You know, I don't know, man. I think he's getting a little love now, but yeah, I mean, he's a void legendary, so you got to build him. But, you know, if he didn't look so much like the Lich King from WoW, you know, I probably wouldn't like him as much. Hegemon is absolutely fantastic. Is the only character in the game that basically has the Han shoots first passive, where he's just always going to go before anybody else, unless there's another Hegemon that's faster on the team, which is great because you can, look at this, decrease attack and block active skills cooldown, really awesome. So if you go first, apply those. They can only really basic attack. It was sort of an Arena thing that was used for a while, and now I believe people still use them in Arena, but it's a little bit RNG because I think you have to put like a stun set on him and trying to get the accuracy high enough on him where he can still land essentially these moves on people that have massive resistance down in the arena. From what I understand, isn't as easy as it used to be. Now, moving on here, he can also farm too because he can attack first. So Soulless was one of the highest hitting damage characters in the game. His A3 hits extremely hard, and his A2 is actually bugged where it's a little better than it says it is. And on top of it, he has a stun on basic and ally defense and faction crypts. In my personal opinion, they should just switch this ally defense in all battles and make him have the highest ally defense in all battles or something, because he needs a little bit more to really be used in a lot of things. But this move here, which attacks all enemies, hits really, really hard, and the shield that he puts on himself can be ridiculous. It's a little bit of a bummer, I believe, because he doesn't really... He needs like one more thing to be good, and it's also hard for him to walk through the doorway because his neck gets smacked so much. But I do actually have a video talking about Soulless and where you can use him and stuff, so you can find that on the channel. I do like him. I think he's a little underrated, but he's still not quite the best. Then we get to Tomblord, another legendary that I actually have fully built out, who I believe is personally amazing. He's one of the only people that has decreased attack as well as decreased defense built in on AoE, but it also resets the turn meter of people as well. Because if you look, decreases turn meters on all allies with less than 50% HP by 100%. So if you use this later on, it does the decreased attack and defense, but also puts everyone's turn meter, you know, to like 0. But if you do it early on, then you got decreased defense for your next person's AoE or whatever. He also does the A2, which is 4 poisons. That's 4 poisons, 5% on everyone, which is pretty nuts because he's the only person in the game that can do 4 poisons on everyone at the same time, okay? Basic attack's a triple hit and it's decreased speed. Very good. Defense in arena bows by 42%, so he's the highest defense in arena bows. Now, Thea the Tomb Angel, I'm not going to go in too much because she uses Hex, which isn't fully fleshed out yet, and you have to basically get her from the Doom Tower. I haven't got her yet. I haven't really been playing on my main account. I like to make all these new characters and play the beginning part of the games tends to be my favorite. And I just really haven't been too excited to pull her. But she is, in my personal opinion, actually quite good. And I think the art on this character is fantastic, especially from this side. Now, if we move on here to what I call Mr. Meesink's Bystophus, he's one of the characters that needs a buff. Yes, he is also one of the bosses from the original campaign. If you check him out, this is probably his best move, which inflicts a critical hit against targets under block active skills debuff and heals by 20% of the damage inflicted. That's a pretty bad move, right? Look at this. Chance of placing block active skills and a chance of decreased defense. Doesn't even have a 100% chance when actually booked. And look at this, chance of block active skills, chance of placing a fear debuff on targets under block active skills. It's just not a good character. Even if he does look like Mr. Meesinks and we think that that's cool, he's just not good. Now, Narma the Returned, I think it's a bad rep. I think she's quite good, but people say she's not. Attacks an enemy, chance of increasing the duration of 3 random debuffs on the target. I like increasing the duration of debuffs on the basic attack. It's sort of like a warlord move. Attacks an enemy, chance of decreased attack, which is also good, and heals your allies. Then heals increased by each poison target on the target. So you're starting to think clan boss, right? Check this out. Attacks an enemy, 75% chance of placing 3 5% poisons and a poison sensitivity debuff for 3 turns. The problem with her arises that she is a classic meta clan boss team, meaning let me decrease how much damage he does, continually heal my allies and poison them and have them take turns and die over time until we no longer can withstand his damage. And that's just not where clan boss teams have gone in this day and age. They've gone super high end with things like Unkillable and all these crazy compositions, especially now that the AI deal is out. And because of that, these classic style champions that are designed classically for clan boss don't really work anymore. Now, moving on from Narma, because that is in fact the last one for Knights Revenant, we are on to the Dark Elves. All right, starting with Visix is the login reward legendary Void champion that we all get. Used to be kind of bad, now is actually kind of good. Places provoke debuff on everybody, attacks all enemies, decrease speed, ally protection, hits multiple times with turn meter manipulation. For that reason, this character is actually not too bad anymore. Once you get her, yeah, you can build her if you need her. Lydia. Okay, so Lydia, you have to complete all of the Faction Wars 3 stars. I love my Lydia. I do use her. Unfortunately, I do believe Draco Morph is better. That doesn't mean that Lydia is bad. It just means that Lydia isn't getting as many spaces on my team because I have another option, which is Draco Morph. However, Lydia in and of herself is a ridiculously good character. You should complete Faction Wars together. The fact that she has strengthened on top of the decreased defense and weakened debuffs and increased speed. She has more things than Draco Morph has, for instance, going for her. The biggest issue that I have mostly with Lydia is probably how hard she is to get. I mean, you have to complete Faction Wars together and you can't pull her from a Void Shard. So by time people have already got her, you know enough about the game. You don't really even need my opinion on her because you know right what I mean about her and where she fits in. Now, if we move on to Blind Seer, one of the Void legendaries I've always really wanted that I haven't been able to pull yet. Look at the basic. 3 times the random, chance of decreasing turn meter each and every time. Really good. Block debuffs on all allies for 2 turn. Shield buff on all allies equal to 30% of her max HP 2 turn. Again, really good. Third move, revives all dead allies, places a block damage buff on all allies except this champion for 1 turn. You can see how nuts she is. She is very, very good, and ally defense in all battles is 34%. Ridiculous. She's one of the best Void legendaries in my personal opinion when it comes to supports. Her power has fallen off a little bit with time because the supports have gotten so crazy. You got people like Duchess and all these other ones, but the fact that you have triple hit on basic that decreases turn meter is really, really good, especially paired with people that have charges, and then reviving all dead allies, but then placing block damage buff on them is pretty insane as well. Okay, so absolutely top tier. You need to build her. Ruel the Huntermaster is one of the new characters here. He was based around Hex. Personally, I don't like the Hex debuff that much. I don't really think he's that good. Increasing accuracy is kind of cool and all, but if you look here, attacks in all enemies, places an extra hit. They have to have Hex in order for that to happen, and they ignores 25% of each target's defense. If they're 4 or more, I don't think 25% is that big of a deal. Plenty of rares have 50%, and then decreasing defense on just the basic attack, kind of not that impressive. I don't really like this guy. I think he's highly overrated. Going over the Ghostborn, I think is one of the best legendaries in the entire game. Reason being, very simple kit. Attacks all enemies, has a 100% chance when booked of placing 60% decreased defense. This debuff cannot be resisted. Pow. That's why right there. Cannot be resisted. Meaning, unless you're hitting weak or something, this is always going to apply the decreased defense, which means you can get away from that 3% chance of them always resisting something, for instance, and it's one of the only ways in the entire game that you can actually consistently auto something is if you have unresistible debuffs, for instance, like this character. For that reason, this is one of the best characters to pull, and I wish I had them on my main. Queen Eva is my farmer on my main account. Absolutely insane, because you don't need very much crit rate. I think it's like 60-something% crit rate to have 100% crit rate with her for farming, because on her A3, when she kills somebody, resets it again, but then has 15% chance of inflicting a critical hit, and then 19% crit in all battles. So she's the leader as a farmer. 15 plus the 19 there, what is that, 34% on top of whatever crit rate you already have. Yeah, so 66% crit rate is all you need on her, and that doesn't include mastery. So what, 61% crit rate is all you have to add on to her, and that doesn't include the 15% base that you get, so that is even less. What is that, 46%? Yeah, that's all you have to add. So just add a pair of crit rate gloves and she has 100% crit rate effectively for farming. And I'm getting a phone call. Astralith has been a meme for how bad she is for a while, mostly because she's based around bombs. Bombs have not been something that have typically been in the meta. I think eventually that could change, but it's not going to change unless they add something about bombs itself to be changed. The fact that she can fill turn meter is pretty great. I have one fully built and a video guide out on her talking about her in depth, but her major problem is this move here, exchanges remaining HP levels with a target enemy, then attacks with default skill. It can't be used on a boss, so getting her low HP on purpose to swap it with a boss doesn't work, and just swapping HP with like one mob doesn't really matter when you're one-shotting entire waves with Seer, so she's never really got any use other than, you know, people that she's the only legendary you have and you need ally speed in arena battles. Unfortunately, I think she'll get better. Vizier has always been known as essentially the king of increasing the duration of all debuffs. So if you want somebody who, once you have a debuff on the person, it's going to have like 40 stacks of it, you pick Vizier, because he will effectively make that happen. He has a debuff spread, which is cool, and he also has block buffs, heal reduction, and decreased attack, which if he didn't have the heal reduction, he would be even better for clan boss, but because he does, compared with his A1, means the healing reduction almost always sticks on the clan boss, which is a real bummer. This is the debuff spread I'm talking about, and he also perfect veils himself for 3 turns if the target's under 2 or more debuffs. Unfortunately, debuff spread hasn't really found its way to the meta. It's only really used in the fact that if you don't have AoE HP burn, you can spread an HP burn to multiple people for defeating things like the Spider or Doom Tower, and his passive isn't really that big of a deal because it just perfect vows himself. So he's not necessarily as good as he looks as soon as you look at his basic attack, because the rest of it, the pieces aren't 100% there. But if you really do just worry about decreasing or want to increase the duration of debuffs, this is the guy for you. Zavia is one of my favorite legendaries in the entire game, mostly because of her A3, attacks all enemies, enemies killed by the skill cannot be revived. That's a nice addition just for things like Ice Golem, but then deals damage from all poison debuffs on the target instantly. Poison debuffs will only deal half the standard damage when this skill hits bosses, meaning you can effectively nuke dungeons all the way up to 20. They remove this poison popping deal for dungeons 21 through 25. Huge bummer. So unfortunately, she got a big nerf there, but now what you can do is use her as poison application and actually completely deter her from using her A3 with the new AI changes, and only use her for applying poisons if you want here. This is only usable when Bellinor is on the team and applies the debuff spread, taking 4 random debuffs from the target, placing them all enemies. Could be pretty cool, combined with people like Tomblord, but unfortunately, once again, Bellinor isn't somebody I have or somebody that we can really worry about getting the pair for, because pairings almost never happen. Foley was the person who caused the biggest drama in the game back with the Foley fusion, because effectively they baited people into fusing for this guy. Then they had a big paywall at the end. He's one of the only people that has a 4-hit on basic, and he's probably the only person in the game that's got a 4-hit on basic that also has decreased defense on basic, that also has the ability to hit another 4 times that has I mean, he's got a lot of multi-hitting. So if you're thinking Giant Slayer, he's probably the Giant Slayer guy for you. The biggest thing I've seen him used for is the fact that you can use him in arena as a nuker. You can look here, attacks all enemies, okay, then attacks the target enemy, meaning that it hits the target twice. So people were using him to counter Rodos back when Rodos was the biggest deal, because you could AoE, do half his health, then attack Rodos and finish him. So effectively one-shotting everyone with Foley. I was using Foley for a while, and he countered Tormin, because whenever he got froze, you can see here, immediately removes that and boosts his turn meter. So that was kind of a nice way that you could counter Tormin as well. Pretty good character, somebody worth the build, and overall has fallen off a little bit in the meta. But I think if Giant Slayer procs and multi-hits ever become a meta for some kind of like Fire Knight clan boss or something, Foley could see a pretty strong return. Lanakis The Chosen, one of my favorite legendaries, and the legendary that I pulled on my 3rd Ancient Shard on my newest account, which is only 4 days old, and we're on episode 3 at this point. Great character. If you crit, you get continuous heal on yourself. You can charge and 30% turn meter fill your team, and you get a chance for an extra turn on the A3, so Relentless isn't too bad on her. And on top of it, increased attack, increased crit with the charge means this character is typically good in a blender type of team with like Sineshan, Skullcrown, or people that have real high tier AoEs on their basic. Great character, absolutely should build her if you get her, and one of my personal favorite legendaries. Little Miss Annie is pretty fantastic character. She was a Void legendary that when she came out I thought was going to be used a lot more in arena. Pretty big fan. You build her, she's fairly unique, and also the aesthetic is pretty good. You should probably build her. Urost The Soulcage, you're going to get him from Doom Tower, and I don't know too much about him if I'm being honest. From what I understand, he is sort of the supportive tanky type, one of the only people that actually has the combination of strength and ally protection. Attacks all enemies and has a chance of placing poisons. Shield on himself. Shield value increases per poison. Attacks, placing a poison. Okay, so he's basically a poisoner, strengthener, provoker, and also decreases champion's max HP. The look's all right, but unfortunately I don't know enough about him to really give an honest opinion. Nekhret the Great, kind of like Lanakis, a charger, but has amazing, absolutely insane passives. I mean, you'll have to read it. I don't want to go through the whole thing, but Nekhret the Great, if you get him, you should 100% max him. One of the best characters in the game, has charge, has plenty of things that make this character absolutely top tier. You should be very happy if you get it. Sifi, I don't even need to talk about. Again, one of the best characters in the entire game. Revi, I mean, this move right here is insane. Block debuffs first before anything, then fills turn meter of all allies, increased defense, increased speed. She was the character when she came out, really counted the Tormin meta. Harvest Jack, in my personal opinion, is still a little underrated. Was very good when he came out, and then people stopped talking about him, but his A3 is pretty nuts. It does sleep if the true fear is not placed, so you know you're going to be getting one or the other, which is pretty nuts. And the A2, if you look at it here, block buffs if they're under fear, but also removes any attack and puts the decreased attack instead, removes continuous heal and places poison instead. So he's effectively almost like a flipper, basic attack, chance of fear as well, and can also steal random buffs. Big fan of Harvest Jack. Suzerain Katonn's another character that doesn't really get talked about that much, but the A2 is kind of good because what it does is it has a chance of doing one or the other, which is 25% weaken or decreased defense. So in one character, If you actually make it where the A3 isn't used, which removes shield block unkillable, then attacks them, places 100% heal, and this buff removal cannot be blocked or resisted, which is really nuts. By the way, this is another thing, can't be blocked or resisted, so being able to remove that's really good for arena and stuff like that. But if you remove him actually doing this move and only does the A2 for PvE, and put him in reflex gear, then you can effectively have him do defense down and weaken, just build into one character. Also, everything's in AoE, so he works really well with stun sets, which also can't be resisted, so you can remove the block damage, shield unkillable, and then have an unresistible stun as well. So Suzerain gets a little bit of slept on. Now, Nethro, I've got 5 of, so yeah, trust me, I'm sick of talking about this character, but he's amazing. Poisons, stun, AoE decreased turn meter, a really solid kit that has fallen out of the meta a little bit as time's gone on, but people that can decrease turn meter by 75% on AoE will always find themselves being used. Mashald, one of the best characters because of the A2, which places True Fear and Leech on everybody, increases speed and increased crit damage buff on all allies. Very good. Has something that removes debuffs, or excuse me, it actually steals buffs before attacking. So it will steal all the buffs on the basic itself. The fact that it's a pseudo AoE. So he attacks, and then if they have Leech, he attacks everybody. And because of the attacking everybody type thing, you can use the A2 into basic attack to have him be used as AoE form of CC and waves, because the A2 will fear people, and then the A1 will basic attack as well, and you can try to use a stun set or something for that. So there's ways you can use him as a CC guy instead of just the pure damage that people use him for. I've got a couple of them. Bloodgorge is a character I wish I pulled, very good in arena, because the A3 here decapitates, ignores defense. That's 100% defense. Enemies killed by this skill cannot be revived, so you can just one-shot and remove someone from the field, and puts each target's skills on cooldown, which is pretty nuts as well. Bad-el-Kazar, everyone knows, one of the best characters in the game because of that A2, removing debuffs from all allies, places continuous heals on all allies, places poison debuffs on all enemies. Simple, sweet, to the point. You do extra damage against poison people. Scartorsus, very good because he has AoE stealing of buffs on the basic, removes debuffs, and also generates turn meter, as well as placing increased attack and crit rate on somebody. Very good. Also, is one of the only people that has ally speed in dungeons, 33%, which is, again, the highest speed bonus in the game. Now, Elegaeus is somebody that I think is complete garbage, and if you pull them on a free-to-play account, you should probably quit that account. Satio was supposed to go in the Shadowkin, but they released him early. In my personal opinion, he is, I want to say, a little overrated. Decreased defense on the basic, taxing enemies, attack up, crit damage up. Pretty cool. It decreases the cooldown of this skill by 1 turn if the target has more than 50% HP after the attack. So they have to still be alive, and you have to not do more than 50% HP, meaning that you're rewarded for not dealing damage. And then the A3 here attacks all enemies except the initial target if there's 3 or more lives, so they have to have 3 or more lives for that to work. I don't like people that have these conditions that work against them. The only thing I like about him is passive, which ignores defense for each time his champion attacks the same target, which can go up to 30% defense on the same target. I think that's kind of a cool mechanic. Other than that, the ally attack in dungeons is whatever, and I think he's a little overrated. Rhodos the Lost Groom, what can I say? One of the best characters in the game. And did you know they actually made Rhodos the Lost Groom based around me? It actually has the same hairstyle that I always have and have had. And they make it look like me, and then she even has my same nose and all that if you zoom in. It's true. And they made him crying all the time, you see? There's no reason. His name isn't the Crying Groom or whatever. It's Rhodos the Lost Groom. You see, there I am. They have me bawling away. But amazing character. Pretty cool character. They put him out right when I started complaining about stuff, so they decided to make fun of me. Crypt-King Graal here, I think, is a Destiny 2 character that got lost into the game and is desperately trying to find his way into usefulness with people that do freeze and HP burn. Unfortunately, he looks way cooler than he actually is. Probably worth the max if you don't have decreased attack people and you're desperate. But other than that, that would be undead. The Demon Spawn is loaded with good legendaries that I have not pulled yet. Blood Twin is pretty good in arena, decreases max HP as well as always blocking somebody's revive when you kill them, which is really nice because you can use them in things like Ice Golem or anywhere that revives really matter. I've used them a decent amount. Krutraxa, in my opinion, is somebody who's fallen off heavily. Used to be kind of a single target nuker that was effectively used in Arena. I think she's still used in Arena, but I do believe the better characters have come out. Duchess Luid, one of the best characters in the game, arguably the best reviver, perfect veil placer, debuff stopper. An overloaded kit and was the beginning of power creep. Lord Shazar, the best speed arena in the game, also isn't that bad because he does block debuffs and increase attack on himself before you bomb. So you get the increased attack up, and if you didn't know, bomb scale upon attack. Good character. More than Macab, I have way too many of these guys. His peril will never proc, and his A2 requires too many books to be useful. The only good thing about him is his ally speed in all battles. And yeah, maybe I'm being harsh, but I've tried 3 of them, and it's hard to get him to work. Flame Tongue, quite good. Even better when paired with her partner. In my personal opinion, is what the new medium level legendary is now. It used to be where this type of character, just you look at this type of move, for instance, and be like, holy moly, this kid's overloaded. But nowadays it's like, yeah, that's a good character, but it's not one of the best characters in the game. But if this character was released when the game originally came out, I'd be like, what is wrong with people? This character's nuts. And then Canifron was originally not super good. And again, another character based upon me, because you can see he's got my retired Kraken mask on. Amazing character because he hits super duper hard with his A2. You kind of gotta go A3 into the A2. People use him in Arena and as a single target nuker, and honestly, they did a great job with the art. I think his claws look a little dumb, but other than that, really good job with the art. Drexthar, you can farm him for free if you do Tag Team Arena, is the only real way to get a good amount of HP burn 100% for free. Used to be one of the best HP burns, but has since fallen off. I still think he's one of the best looking characters in the game, and you should probably farm him. He's pretty good, especially if you're free to play. Now, Countess Lix was somebody you could use to get for 150 shards, valuing her right around $200. She's another person like Flame Tongue that has a fairly overloaded kit, but isn't one of the best characters in the game anymore, and you really have to have the pairing of the duo for her to be quite good. Tyrant is a carry because of the way, if you look at his moves, he's got HP burn 100% on everybody, but it's 3 turns, and then he protection as well as defense on all allies, which is nuts. The passive decreases damage inflicted by enemies as well with the HP burn, so that's insane because you're going to be HP burning everyone, and you already have ally protection, decreased defense, so it'll make your team last a lot longer. Prince Kymar is one of the only people in the game other than Renegade that can reset the cooldown of all ally skills. Is effectively the best person at the game at actually doing this. He also does ally speed in arena battles. Not as good as Shazar, but it's still great. The fact that he can attack all enemies and place poisons and attack all enemies, remove all buffs and sweep people is just ridiculous. He's one of the best characters in the game. If you pull him, you should instantly max him. So we get into the orcs, we start to get into kind of some of the weirdos. Angar is pretty good in Arena because of the provoke. He's better than he used to be. Warlord is essentially the god of almost everything. He's good in PvE, PvP. Most of it's because of his A3, depleting turn meter, as well as putting each target's skills on cooldown, which is nuts. He also goes fast, etc. He's 10 out of 10. Iron Brago is really good because of his passive, which increases the defense of all allies by 10% of his defense. He also can hit really hard. I think he looks weird. Like, personally, I don't like the look of him. Normally, look at the difference in art in some of these characters, right? It's like, okay, yeah, decent job, thick armor, and then suddenly it's just paper thin. The texture is obviously just flat textures of chains. They really missed it on the art. The Head Hunter. Okay, yeah, I think he's quite bad. The reason being, sacrifices HP of this champion's max HP, then equalizes HP levels of the targeted enemy. HP levels both of the champion targeted enemy will be brought down to the level of the one with the lowest HP, and doesn't work on bosses, so who cares? Just have him actually do something instead. And then attacks, look at this, attacks all enemies. After attacking, the champion sacrifices HP equal to 50% of his HP again. So he just constantly hurts himself and then places 2 continuous heal buffs on the champion for 2 turns. It's like, why? Why is he killing himself? Grants in an extra turn if he kills somebody and heals him 10%. It's just a bad character. Like, I don't understand why he's legendary. King Graal is another character. It's like, why are you a legendary? I don't think this is a very good character. Attacks all enemies, 20% of each defense, 5% for each buff on the target. It's like, okay, rares have better moves. There's a lot of legendaries in here that are kind of garbo, in my personal opinion. This is the only one that's like kind of okay, because you can do decreased defense and weaken on the same one. So Gomlik Skyhide isn't that bad. You look at the passive here. Whenever 4 or more buffs are placed on the enemy team in a single turn, places a shield buff on the champion equal to 15%. It's like, okay, you get 15% shield once their Sifi goes and places a million. It's like, your shield buff isn't going to do anything except maybe trigger the enemy Tormin, who then freezes your team. Robar used to be really good. The problem with Robar is, unfortunately, they removed the way Relentless works, so he can't stack extra turns, and he can't pop off like crazy anymore. But he has one of the hardest hitting moves in the game. His A2 and A3 hits really, really, really hard, and he has decreased defense, which is always good. Tila Gormain is complete trash. If you pull her, I'm sorry. I have like 4 of her. Kreela Witch Arm is actually really good, because look at this. Places a shield buff equal to 10% of its champion's max HP on the ally with the lowest HP. So you get shield on the basic, places stun debuff for 1 turn, but then 80% chance of joining up with 3 random allies to attack a random enemy. To attack a random enemy, all allies joining the attack will use their default skill. So you get a charge, and then the A3, increased attack, increased crit rate, buff on all allies for 3 turns, and then attacks all enemies. So mostly it's for the charge, so she's kind of a charger if that is what you need. So people do use her for that reason. Plus the shield buff on the ally with the lowest HP can be good in Scarab, all right? So it's okay. Grog the Bloody is one of the coolest looking characters, so he needs a buff because he only has a decreased speed debuff 2 turns, attacks all enemies, fills the champion's turn meter 20%, not a big deal, attacks an enemy and steals the target turn meter, actually a good move, and then ally speed in dungeons 24%. This should be the 33% to keep it in line with the other legendaries, and the steals the target's turn meter should be steals the target's turn meter and then grants an extra turn. That way it would be on 3 turn cooldown, even when books, you know, it would go to 4 and then you get the extra turn, and then it would kind of make sense. And then maybe the champion's turn meter getting, you know, extra champion's turn meter here from the attack would make sense too. He probably needs that buff because right now he's not very good. So the orcs have this weird balance of like really good legendary like Warlord, and you know, Iron Brogo is pretty good. You could argue, you know, Robar is one of the better ones, and then you just kind of have some trash ones in there. Skinwalkers has pretty good value in legendaries. This guy is pretty good, especially when paired with Minaya as a duo. They can basically do most content in the game. Really good with stun cell, also good in arena. Brockus is insane because it's the only person that can attack 6 times, and effectively if he gets killed first, he'll revive, then you get to attack 6 times. So even if he dies, he's useful. War Chief is somebody who can be used against Magma Dragon and effectively be the entire reason you can beat Magma Dragon because he has so much provoke in his team. He looks great, looks like a high tier, you know, Karazhan Raider for World of Warcraft or whatever that dungeon was back in the day, that spiky warrior shield. But yeah, unfortunately, he is fallen prey to the meta. Now, Hawkern Smashlord is somebody that people use desperately in arena if you don't have somebody that is able to effectively do block debuffs, and that is something that he can do, as well as removing debuffs, which is pretty good. He can hit fairly hard and has ally HP in dungeons. Unfortunately, he hurts himself quite a good deal, and they just put the glowy effect on his horns, but they didn't actually do anything other than like the textures in the eye, so it just looks very painted on, which is a bummer. Now, Longbeard is one of my favorite characters because he attacks the enemy with 4 allies, that's your entire team, and increases the damage inflicted by those people. It also is a 4-turn cooldown, so if you put him in reflex and then block the A2 from happening, which is actually a weaken, so a lot of people want it to happen, you can get that to happen over and over again. The basic attack ignores shields and block damage buffs too, so he guarantees that even when you charge, he himself will also go through shield and block damage too, which is pretty good. So moving on to Norog. Actually, I like Norog. I think it's a little underrated. The fact that he's immune to these CC forms are really nice, but look at this. Decreases the damage taken by all allies that are under no active buffs by 25%. Meaning if you don't have strength and decreased defense or anything like that, you still sort of do, because he's decreasing the damage taken, which I think is pretty good, especially when you're not going first. The only thing is this does not pair very well with people that run shields. Also, increase ally defense in dungeons by 40% is quite good, so I like Norog personally. I actually have him and I have maxed him out. Lizardman has another good amount of decent characters. You have Drake's Blood, which is the character that you get once you've completed literally all of the missions, which I don't think anyone has yet because there's still 0 reviews, and he is absolutely insane. Obviously, you're going to max him if you get him. Krisk is considered one of the best characters in the entire game. I'm not going to do a full review of him. I don't need to. If you get him, you should max him out. He's absolutely, absolutely crazy. Basically, the best debuffer and buffer in the game, as well as just the amount of damage reduction you get. I actually think this character is highly underrated, Vergamkar, and I'm going to tell you why. Because the basic attack is a stun, which I think is good when you have a stun on that. Removes all provoke debuffs and a random debuff from all allies, so it's not just provoke, but you don't have to worry about provokes because of him. Decreased defense for allies who have debuffs removed. Places a shield buff equal to 20% of his max HP. That always happens. So you have a nice big shield. Attacks an enemy, and he has high HP, by the way, 22,000. Attacks all enemies, removes 1 random buff from each enemy. But then when booked, it's 3 turns, but even when not booked, 75% chance of removing 2 random buffs from each enemy. So you have a higher chance of removing 2 buffs. Place a 100% heal reduction for 3 turns on enemies who have 1 or more buffs removed, and place 60% decreased defense for 2 turns on enemies who have 2 or more buffs removed. So AKA, if he rolls a 75% chance, he removes more buffs and then places those good debuffs. Now, the passive is immune to provoke debuffs. Fills this champion's turn meter by 20% each time an enemy attempts to place a provoke debuff on himself. So anytime AoE provokes happen, you get turn meter boost, and then you can basically remove all the provokes themselves, and you get a shield and increased defense and all this stuff too. So personally, I think he's a little underrated. I think he's quite good, especially with the shield being 20% and its HP is 22,000. It's sort of, think of Mountain King. You know how his shield said Mountain King so good? Skull is also hilarious because his basic does not have an ending, meaning that, see, I'll read it. Attacks the enemy 2 times, each hit fills his turn meter, 30% chance to repeat this skill. That can keep happening just like Relentless. So there's a video somewhere of me doing Skull and I edit in the Dragon Dagger claw spec from RuneScape, and he just keeps clawing, and he just claws down like a Faction Wars boss. This can basically happen. It can repeat infinitely, and when that does happen, it's absolutely hilarious to watch. Granted, it's rare, but it's the whole reason I like the character. Now, he does strengthen on himself, provokes 1 enemy, kind of garbage, A2. The A3 is decreased attack, which isn't that good either. However, this is where it gets good. Decreases the attacker's max HP when he gets attacked, so you have that. Can go up to 50%, and it has a chance of placing true fear debuff on targets whose max HP has been decreased by 20% or more. That doesn't have to have happened by his passive. So if you have other people in like Destroy Gear, for instance, he's placing fears all over the place, and the real reason we like him is Revive Skull Swarm with 50% HP and 50% turn meter at the start of each turn. So you have Skull Swarms constantly being revived, and because of that, it gives like a pseudo tank. I was able to beat the Faction Wars for Lizardman just by constantly reviving the Skull Swarm, and everyone kept attacking him, and it was a free cheese, and I 3-starred all of it that way. Rosin, permanent legendary fusion that is in the game, very good because it's AoE turn meter reduction by 100%, defense down and weaken on a single move, triple hit on basic, also removes buffs. Nothing else to say. Great, solid character. You should fuse him. We need more of those type of characters in the game. Fushan's all right, is a product of his time. Ally speed and bows is 24%, so you can use him everywhere. Has a 4-hit, which is kind of nice. Can do a little bit of stunning and CC. I think he's kind of outdated. Roxam is effectively like a worse Dracomorph because he has decreased defense and weaken and all this stuff, but you have to use him under Vel. I haven't seen videos of people using him yet where they've really got to see him popping off. I think maybe somebody out there's got to really figure out how to make him work well so far, because there's just a lot of other characters that do what he does, but he is still a top tier character strictly because of what he does do. The difference is he's a little underrated, or he's not getting very high rated right now because people like Dracomorph exist who are just basically the best characters in the game that do what they do. I mean, AoE weaken defense right there, 3-turn cooldown, attack 4 times a random, placing a poison debuff for 3 turns, kills an enemy, attacks the next enemy. I mean, it's just an insane character. You can see how many reviews there are, 4.9. This character's have a 5.0 literally everywhere in the game. Maybe the best character in the entire game, and it cost me $16,000 to get. That's right, you heard it correctly. Ogryn Tribe is kind of hit or miss. Big On, pretty good because he has stun, constantly hits on AoE, can be a farmer, a product of his time as well. Is still good because he hits hard, but is not as good because there's people that do what he does, but better. War Mother will be amazing once bombs actually do something, because it detonates bombs prematurely. You can use it to instantly detonate bombs, and currently bombs are only used with people that are attack-based, and they're used to go through defense because bombs always ignore defense. I think bombs should ignore defense and do more damage if they have higher HP or something, or have bonus HP, max HP damage or something, because currently bombs aren't really meta, meaning War Mother's not really a good character. Now, Ignatius is one of the best characters in the entire game, though, because if you look at him, he has an unresistible HP burn that goes up to 100% when booked. That is the entire reason people use him, unresistible AoE HP burn. Mossbeard was a fusion, and they kind of tried to make Mossbeard be like the reverse Bad-el. Does more damage if they're under poisons, but heals if we're under more poisons, removes all debuffs but poisons. Kind of weird, and you continuous heal through your poison damage. I never really liked it. It never really worked the way I thought, and if anyone on the enemy team has poison popping ability, you basically sack yourself instantly. Shamrock is just a racist Irish ginger stereotype that they put in the game just to be offensive. And then Draco the Gaunt, pretty bad. I'm gonna be honest, I think it's pretty bad. 20% chance to stun is a joke. Increasing attack, increasing defense on allies. Great, I guess. Block damage buffs for one allies if they have less than 30%. So if they're barely alive, you get that. 3-turn cooldown, so that's cool. But then look at this, okay? Places shield buff, champions max HP, and that's basically what it does. It shields or heals, and that's about it. Gurgo is a character that's nuts because his A2 removes 2 random buffs from people with a 100% chance of freezing them and then grants an extra turn. Really good, highly underrated, one of the best characters in the entire game. Probably better than Cardell, Arbiter, and Seer combined. Barbarians are another weird mix of characters because overall their quality is like, meh. I don't like Yukaro the Scourged. I don't think people who just work around freeze and decrease speed are particularly good. I also don't really care about block damage. Mostly I'm looking for ways to get through bosses quickly or through waves quickly, and freeze prolongs that. Warcaller herself is a pretty decent character. I have not been lucky enough to pull her. I like passives that decrease the damage all allies receive. I think that's very good. The fact that she receives that damage instead is kind of scary for AoEs. Now, Turvold is one of the hardest hitting characters in the game. He's one of the people that is basically based around single target nuke damage and has been effectively used in the clan boss to some pretty crazy extent numbers, like 1k type of damage. Valkyrie has been considered the best character in the game for a long time and has maybe lost that throne, but is still one of the best. Her A2 is a counterattack, one of only 3 in the game, which also puts on one of the biggest shields in the game. She hits hard because she's based upon defense. This character overall is a very top tier character. If you get her, you should max her instantly. Elder Skarg has another cool passive which reduces damage from legendaries, but only for himself. And what it should do instead is reduce the damage everyone on your team receives from legendary damage. Then it would make more sense. Unfortunately, it hits multiple times, and there's some, you can read it as all these different effects going on, but in practice, it doesn't really work that well. Trust me, I have him. Now, Contra the Cyclone, in my personal opinion, when I read her kit the first time and read this move, attack all enemies 3 times, chance of placing all these things, I was super excited about. I thought the passive was super exciting as well. I think what she needs in order to be nuts is an additional move. This is a cool move, but it's really, she's a Whirlwind Barbarian is what they did when they made her, and I think that's kind of the meme, is she just has Whirlwind Barbarian, and that's really it. So she's a character that needs Reflex, essentially, to be used. Scowl of the Drakes is a really good free character and is somebody that personally I think the passive here that heals all allies 10% of their max HP at the start of each turn is actually really good because it also increases speed buff on random allies. And if you look at the A3, you revive them and ally protection, the person who you revive. So it's kind of a supportive defensive type of character. When they're based upon defense, you can build them tanky and also hit hard. And the fact that she does have stun on AoE is pretty nice as well. A lot of people use stun set on her. Alton hits really hard, was considered for a while to be the best decreased attack in the game because he did decrease attack as well as defense up at the same time with 33% defense in all battles for Clan Boss, and that was considered effectively the best lead plus decreased attack for a while before we changed the meta with how the teams work. Sacred Order has a lot of insane quality legendaries, and Cardell, which is maybe the new best legendary in the game, is completely overloaded, looks awesome. They did a great job with the aesthetics. I mean, look at this, ally speed and Unbowed, so he has the best aura. I don't want to read all of this because it's an essay now, but effectively, this character is your in-game Paul. I mean, that's basically what you're hunting for. Venus is what you used to be hunting for. He was the version of that character before, where effectively she has all the debuffs you want. She has HP burn, she has defense down, she has weaken, she has poison on the basics, she has everything you want for Clan Boss or any wave. Sir Nicholas is even better now because what you can do due to the fact that unkillable buff and continuous heal on yourself with the AI changes is you can make Sir Nicholas by himself basically build an unkillable team, which is really nice. It's something I got to do, and Sir Nick has always been one of the best characters in the game. Cupidus is kind of a bait. I mean, he's okay, don't get me wrong, but I feel people think he's a lot better than he is and get baited into building him. Martyr is another one of the best characters in the game because she's one of the only 3 counterattacks in the entire game and is a character that the devs have said before they consider the mistake. They feel like when they added her in the game, she is too overloaded because of the decreased defense, increased defense, counterattack, and also decreasing attack at the same time. They think that's an overloaded kit, and they're sad they added her into the game. Plus, they also have ally defense and bows, but they also think counterattack was a mistake. So Abyss is an extremely hard hitting defense down type of character. This is one of the characters I had on my list for one of the worst legendaries, but then Ash showed me how hard she actually hits, and I was proven wrong about that one. Arrow is somebody I've tried to get work time and time again. I like ignoring defense. I like the additional chance of crit because it gives me more room to work with the critical damage. I like the stealing buffs. I was never able to get him to work. Astralon, great character. Pairs with, what's her name, Countess, was an expensive fusion. In my opinion, one of the better but cringier looking aesthetics, and is probably worth 100% build if you pull them even in today's date. And then Roshkard the Tower, another character that's completely nuts because it has block damage buff on all allies for 2 turns, which is something that is highly needed when building unkillable comps. So another top tier character. Overall, the Sacred Order, you could basically pull anyone in here. If you pull any of the Sacred Order people, except maybe Arrow and Cupidus, maybe Abyss, they're all top tier.